Okay, good afternoon, students. I'm back again with my next lecture on research and publication ethics. So before I proceed with today's lecture, I would like to know if any one of you recollect the earlier lecture and whether you have any questions or doubts, etc., on the previous lecture. In case anyone has a very specific doubts or a specific question, you may please unmute yourself and then ask the question. I'll just give you about 15 seconds.
Hello.
Okay, there don't seem to be any doubts, so I proceed with the present lecture. So I would like to then probably recollect one or two slides from the earlier lecture. I had talked about scientific misconducts, FFP, that is fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. And I also gave you an idea about what is plagiarism, then why do people plagiarize? Right. Why do people plagiarize and things like that? Okay, so let me just wait for a minute. Oh yeah. All right. So sorry for the interruption, and so I had given you some idea about FFP and especially on plagiarism and why people indulge in plagiarism and what are the consequences, especially for students. So so that I would like to just remind you again that UGC had brought out a gazette in 2018 on plagiarism, and they have also given a definition for plagiarism, which means the practice of taking someone else's work or idea and passing them as one's own. Then there were certain rules which were introduced by UGC, where they have defined different levels of plagiarism. So they start with level 0, where the similarities are up to 10%, and they are called as minor similarities, and there are no penalties. Then next is the level 1 type of plagiarism, where the similarities are between 10 to 40%, and then, of course, the penalties start creeping in. And level 2 means that you have similarities above 40%, but below 60%. And level 3 similarities are all above 60%. So now the consequences for students, especially with regard to thesis and dissertations, they are quite severe. Of course, as I said, if it's as long as you are within level 0, there's not much of a problem. But when you start having similarities above 10% and then below 40%, such a student will be asked to submit a revised thesis script within a stipulated time period, which doesn't exceed 6 months. This is not too much of an issue for most of the people, but still it is not a desirable thing to happen. Then come the more serious punishments, where level 2, where the similarities are between 40 and 60%, and such a student shall be debarred from submitting a revised script for a period of 1 year. This is quite disastrous for especially a student who would be maybe at the end of already at the end of his five-year period, within 6 months or so, maybe 4.5 years, then if he has to wait for 1 full year, then probably his registration will have to be renewed, and there could be other issues with maybe with fellowship and things like that. So that's not, again, a very pleasant thing to happen. Then, of course, is the worst case where it is level 3, where the similarities are about 60%. And for such a student, the registration for the program itself shall be cancelled. So this is a very, very severe thing to happen. And God forbid that none of you should be in this bracket at all at any time in future. So please do remember these punishments, consequences of plagiarism. And UGC is very, very serious about this. And so please do keep this in mind when you write your thesis or dissertation, and make doubly sure that even there are no unintentional mistakes which are crept into your thesis or dissertation. Okay, so now these are the problems as far as the students are concerned. UGC has not spared, of course, the faculty also, and for them the punishments are more severe, and they go something like this, where again they have different levels of similarities: 10%, 10 to 40%, 40 to 60%, and about 60%. And here the consequences for the faculty are very severe, because from level 2 onwards, they have the punishments which are basically like right to an annual increment in salary, which is very a substantial punishment. And then they'll not be allowed to be a supervisor to any new master's or MPhil or PhD students for a period of 2 years. Now, for a person who's quite active in research, if you don't get students, if you depart from taking students, it's going to be quite difficult for him to carry on with research. And then, of course, with the similarities, if they go above 60%, the punishments are very severe for the faculty. They are denied 2 successive annual increments, and they are not allowed to be a supervisor for a period of 3 years. So this is a very, very severe punishment which can happen to a faculty member. Okay, so these were the things which I had talked to you last class, and yeah, these are some of the points which I wanted to highlight, especially for the faculty. See, when the faculty undergoes a punishment, the student also will suffer, because the paper is withdrawn, the manuscript is withdrawn, and then and since the student is a part of the paper as an author, and he will also be classified as a plagiarist, as a person who has indulged in plagiarism. Okay, so now the same gazette which has been released by UGC also dwells on academic integrity, and then they have specified certain duties for the higher educational institutions, HEIs. So to curb plagiarism, basically, the HEI has to declare and implement a technology-based mechanism using some certain software, like there is plagiarism software like Authenticate or Urkund, etc. And they should incorporate it into their system, and then they have to ensure that all documents like thesis, dissertation, publications are free from plagiarism at the time when they are submitted. And not only they should implement this mechanism, they should also make it available and accessible to all the people who are engaged in research. That means starting from faculty onwards, down to students, researchers, postdocs, staff, anyone who's involved in research. Okay, this softwares or mechanisms would be made available to each and everyone who belong to that institute. Okay. And then again, every student submitting a thesis or dissertation, they have to submit an undertaking and indicating that the document which has been prepared by him or her is free from plagiarism, and it's their own original work. And then the institution has to develop a policy on plagiarism, And this policy, of course, again has to be vetted and approved by the statutory bodies under UGC, etc., which are prescribed time to time. And this policy shall be made available to everyone in an open manner. And then the supervisor of every student at the time of submission of thesis has to submit a certificate that the work which was done by the researcher under him and or her, and it is plagiarism free. So everyone is now made a part of the whole thing. So nobody can shirk responsibility when it comes to a crunch. Okay. Then it's also, it's also decreed that the institution should submit to this InflipNet, which is a sort of a data repository of the UGC and where they deposit all the soft copies of master's thesis and doctoral thesis and dissertations. Okay, this depository is called the Shodh Ganga e-repository. So you can find all theses submitted under Indian universities. They are present in this e-repository, and even my thesis is present in this e-repository. Then not only having to upload on Shodh Ganga, but the individual institution should also create kind of an institutional repository, and which can include this thesis or papers and other in-house publications. Okay. Yeah. Then there's another thing which UGC has done to curb plagiarism is to form certain departmental and institutional bodies. Okay, so these are at two levels. One is that if there is any suspicion that some plagiarism has happened in any document, this can be reported first to what is called a Departmental Academic Integrity Panel. Okay. Then, and this panel comprises a chairman who is usually the head of department, and there'll be a member who is a senior academician who is outside this department, and this can be nominated by the head of the institution. And then another member who is well versed with this anti-plagiarism software, etc. And again, he has to be nominated by the head of the department. Then above this departmental academic integrity panel, we have something called the Institutional Academic Integrity Panel, which is a higher body where the chairman happens to be the pro-vice chancellor or the dean or a very senior academician of the institute. And then there are three members of the committee, other members. Again, a senior academician nominated by the head of institution. Then a member which was nominated by the head again, but he happens to come from outside this institution. And then there'll be another, again, a person who is well versed with all this plagiarism software, etc., and who will be a nominee on the panel. So these are the two bodies which every higher education institution should have to take care of the issue of plagiarism in that particular institute. Okay, so having told you about explained to you about the UGC Gazette on plagiarism, not only on the consequences and punishments, then also what are the duties of the educational institution as regard to the approach towards stopping plagiarism. Now, I would like to highlight some cases, about one or two cases, the celebrated cases of plagiarism, which can give you an idea about what can actually happen. The first case which I have taken is that of one Professor Chiranjeevi from Sri Venkateswara University at Tirupati. Now, this person was a professor. During the period 2003 to 2007, he published about 70 papers. And these papers were, of course, it implies a very high rate of publication, because over a period of 4 years, he has published about 70 papers. And one thing which was immediately noticeable and it was odd was that he collaborated with faculty from mathematics. He was a chemistry professor. He collaborated with faculty from mathematics, physics, geology, and environmental sciences of the same university and produced about 45 papers in that same, of the 70 papers. So now, see, collaboration is a good thing to happen. It's always welcome. But then, see, when a person in one particular area of research uh, happens to collaborate all in a very short period of time with different research areas like mathematics, physics, geology, and environmental sciences, it should give rise to some suspicion actually. See, how come there's so many people with different backgrounds involved with this professor in producing certain chemistry papers? So what happened was he was found out because one of his manuscripts landed up with someone who knew about the work and sort of could correlate that this was already something was published earlier, something similar had been published earlier. So that started the whole chain of action. And then slowly, when it was checked, each and every paper was checked, it was found that he was guilty of plagiarization. And not only plagiarization, he also falsified data in many places. So this, of course, there was a committee which was instituted by the Vice Chancellor, and then the committee, of course, found him guilty. And then what were the consequences of this action? See, this person was barred from all responsibilities of having students, etc., and all those things, except taking classes. And then not only he had to bear the consequences, even the students who were working under him and who were a part of all these plagiarized papers, and they also had to face consequences. And one of his students' postdoc contract was not renewed after 1 year. He had to leave. And another student who got a fellowship at a very prestigious university in Singapore, he couldn't even, in fact, go there, and he was simply expelled from the. I mean, even before he could actually start the course, he was asked to go. But then the professor himself, he remained quite brazen till the end, and he was all time insisting that he was innocent. And then not only that, but he started blaming his students. See, this is one thing which is a very, very often seen consequence, because generally what happens is that when the senior professors they get caught doing this kind of scientific misconduct, the first thing is they say that they are innocent, and they simply blame the students, and they say that the students wrote the paper and they simply put his name and uploaded without informing him. See, all these things they would have made some sense several years back, but now it's no longer so, because now when you put your name as an author or a co-author in a paper, you have to take that full responsibility. You cannot say that, look, I was not aware that my name was added, and all those things hold no water at all now, because now whenever a publication manuscript is submitted to a journal, you're required to give the addresses, email addresses of all the co-authors, and all the co-authors are sent a communication by the journal asking them to verify that whether that person is a part of that manuscript or not. So you have to own your responsibility and then take that responsibility of being a co-author also. You can no longer say that I was not aware of this paper or my name being included in the paper. So that doesn't hold, is not acceptable anymore. So you see that what happens is that first of all, as students, you need to be careful about this. And in case it so happens that your supervisors or whoever tries to send a manuscript without informing you, immediately you'll come to know because the journal will send you an email. You must have a look at the manuscript and make sure that your responsibility is there in that. Now, otherwise, the consequences will be percolating to all the authors in the manuscript or wherever which has got plagiarism, which has done plagiarism. Okay, so this was the case of this Professor Chiranjeevi from SV University, and I might come back to this case a little later. Then, so blaming students is a very a recourse which is very often taken by the supervisors. Then I'll tell you about another very strange case. This was a paper. This is a biotechnology field search area. So there was a paper published in Biotechnology Letters in 1989 by two authors, Lee and Agathos. And the title of the paper was The Effect of Amino Acids on the Production of Cyclosporin A. So this was a biotechnology paper related to the development of some drug called cyclosporin A. Then in January 1996, a paper appeared in the journal Applied Microbiology and Biotechnology by two Indian authors, Balakrishnan and Ashok Pandey. And the title of this paper was Influence of Amino Acids on the Biosynthesis of Cyclosporin A. See, now this is an unfortunate thing I would say that whenever if you type in Google plagiarism cases in say physics or chemistry or whatever field you, biology or biotechnology, medicine, it so happens that most of the names which come up happen to be either Indian or Asian, which also implies that there's a very large occurrence of plagiarism which is going on in the country. And unfortunately, there are, of course, cases in the West also which do happen. I had probably shown you one such case last time. But they don't get that much attention like what the Asian bylines get. So, so please be aware of this fact that because of these issues, manuscripts from third world countries are always viewed with suspicion by the Western journals. Okay, so now what happened was in 1997, a complaint was received by editor of this Applied Microbiology that this paper, which appeared in January 96, is actually a plagiarized version of an earlier paper which appeared in 1989. And just to give you an idea about how this looked like, the view on the right is the original paper in Biotechnology Letters in 1989, received January 4th. Effect of amino acids on the production of cyclosporin A by Tolypocladium inflatum by Lee and Agathos. Now, Balakrishnan and Pandey, they produced published another paper, and the title was very close, Influence of Amino Acids. Effect was replaced by influence. On the biosynthesis, see, biosynthesis and production are pretty close words, okay, of cyclosporin A by Tolypocladium inflatum. So rest of the words are all same. So, well, it can happen that a title could be maybe copied or by unintentionally similar or whatever. But then if you go deeper into the whole thing, you can see that the summary on the bottom is the original one. Cyclosporin A was produced in semi-synthetic and synthetic media by Tolypocladium inflatum in suspension culture. Now let's see what these people have written. An indigenously isolated strain of Tolypocladium inflatum, when grown as a suspension culture. Same thing, suspension culture in semi-synthetic and synthetic media. In semi-synthetic and synthetic media, produce cyclosporin A. Okay. So again, cyclosporin A was produced. This he says produce cyclosporin A. Then they do a little bit of juxtaposition of sentences and words. Okay. So the next sentence in the original manuscript reads as L-valine increased the specific production of cyclosporin A by 62% in semi-synthetic media and by 4 times in synthetic media compared to an unsupplemented control culture. Now let's see what these people have written. L-valine increased the specific production. The words are absolutely same. L-valine increased the specific production of cyclosporin A by 75%. So you just change the number from 62% to 75% in semi-synthetic medium and by 10 times and instead of 4 times in the original synthetic medium compared to an unsupplemented control. So practically all same. Okay, there's no change. Then the next line was that D-valine had no stimulatory effect on production. And here also it is absolutely same. D-valine had no stimulating effect on, instead of stimulatory, it's written stimulating effect on the production. Okay, and rest of it you can see, I mean, it's all word to word almost the same. Okay, the presence of amino acids in the exponential growth phase ensured optimal production. Again, it comes over there here somewhere, exponential growth phase for optimal production. So like that, you can see that it was literally almost in the abstract itself, everything was simply copied almost word to word. So this is almost 90% copying in the abstract itself. Then if you go further into the text, you can see there are many other issues, okay? So in the introduction, again, they start with, the report of directed synthesis of cyclosporin A and its analogs in fermentations. So you can also see here directed synthesis of cyclosporin A and several analogs in fermentation. So very, very same and not much difference on one word here and there. They would have just simply juxtaposed or use some different grammatical tense or something like that. And then rest of it is almost the same. So going further, you can see in this study, the effect of several amino acid components of cyclosporin A molecule was investigated. So again, in this study, the original says in this study, the effects of several members of cyclosporin A molecule, okay? Instead of several members, they have written several amino acid components on the drug production, okay, by the same bacteria were investigated. Okay. So then the rest, the whole manuscript, if one goes through, was just simply lifted in toto and then with some minor changes. They thought they were very clever and made some minor changes here and there, and then simply finished that whole thing. And so again, some more instances of the same copy. And you see, in fact, the first line, the organism was kept on a slant of SSM solidified. Same thing over there. Okay. And even the reagents which are used, etc., and all those things, they're all almost the same with some small changes in figures here and there, the numbers here and there. That's all. Okay, so it goes on the whole manuscript, and those who are interested, you can have a look at it and to see how it was written. Okay, so and even the conclusion was also totally lifted from original manuscript. So in some amino acids, here they say, in short, the constituent amino acids, etc., etc. So now what happened? So the editor-in-chief of this journal, then he actually wrote to this corresponding author, Ashok Pandey, with this evidence. And then, of course, again, those people refused to admit that they had plagiarized the manuscript. And then the decision was taken by the editor that any manuscript from these two people will no longer be considered for publication in this journal. And not only that, he also informed the editors of other journals in the related research area covering aspects of microbiology, etc., that this has happened and these two authors were involved. See, you might feel that plagiarism is carried out by people who are not so confident, etc. Not so. That is not true. This person happens to be a very big man, very distinguished scientist of CSR laboratories. But even such a person, you can see that he is indulging in this kind of activity. Okay, then there was another very celebrated case. Some of you may be aware of this case, that of Professor B.S. Rajput from Oman University. Professor B.S. Rajput was a very, very senior and senior person in the university. So what was he? He was actually the Vice Chancellor of Oman University. Now, when they published this paper in Europhysics Letters, okay, called the axion dilation black holes with SL2Z symmetry through some APT-FGP model. So in this case, S.C. Joshi was the student and Professor Rajput was, of course, the head of the Vice Chancellor of the university. Now, what happened was, as soon as this paper came out, the head of department of the physics faculty there, that person noticed this paper and saw that it was plagiarized, and then immediately person red flagged this and brought this to the notice of the higher authorities. Now, what happened was there was a slow. See, the person in limelight was the Vice Chancellor. Now, if you say that the Vice Chancellor has actually indulged in this scientific misconduct, it's a very, very serious charge. Now, what happened was the first thing which the Vice Chancellor did was to suspend this head of department who actually raised the issue. Then, of course, the whole hell broke loose and there was a national outcry. And but then Professor Rajput remained adamant, but instead he laid the entire blame on his student. Again, you see, when a very senior person gets caught in this kind of a situation, the student is made to take the entire brunt of the whole misconduct. Now, not much happened because Rajput was a very powerful person, he was the Vice Chancellor. But then finally this went overseas, and then there were 3 Nobel laureates who wrote to the then President of India, APJ Abdul Kalam, and told him that, look, this is something which has happened and something should be done. So then, of course, things started moving, and there was a committee which was constituted, and then the committee presented its report in February 2003. Now, you see, this paper appeared sometime in 2002, and then, and of course, this was the paper which was actually which was actually plagiarized. This was written by Renata Kalosh in Physical Review D in the year 1996. And again, here it was entirely, the whole thing was just simply copied without any regard for any scientific propriety. So, so you can see that within a year, again, because of pressure from the peers in the research area, and the committee was constituted. And then the committee, of course, upheld the plagiarism charges. And then Dr. Rajput was actually found guilty. And then he resigned immediately after that as the Vice Chancellor. So you can see the consequences of a plagiarism action, how they can bounce on you, and then and what could be these consequences, which could be very, very severe. So this was the editorial comment which was made on that paper, which was published by Rajput and Joshi. So they wrote that the article contains no new results, but instead plagiarizes from the article in Physical Review D by Renata Kalosh, apart from some well-known introductory review material, ending two sentences below equation 4 and first half of discussion, the text of the paper has been copied literally from Professor Kalosh's article. And then the journal apologizes to the earlier author, and regrets that this has not been noticed during the refereeing process. See, there are two, three issues here. One is when a reader reads a paper, he assumes that the journal has taken all precautions, etc., 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 and whatever he's reading is a genuine research work. Now, when that happens, you are actually betraying the trust of the reader also. That is one point. The other point is that very few journals actually would like to admit that they have badly slipped up in the whole process where the manuscript was accepted for refereeing. It was refereed by some 2-3 referees considered as experts, and who had recommended that it could be published, and then finally it has come out in print. So there's a responsibility of the journal also. So very few journals actually would like to admit that they have actually slipped up or were unable to detect this kind of plagiarism before it could get into the print. And because of this, there is sometimes you find that many journal editors, they're very, very reluctant to take up these cases of plagiarism. Okay, then, so this was direct text plagiarism and things like that, which I have discussed. Then there is something called self-plagiarism, which I talked about in my earlier lecture. And here, again, I would like to discuss this case in a bit of detail. See, another problem which very often occurs in the scientific field of scientific research and publishing scientific research is that you're not very sure whether when you send a manuscript to a journal, whether it will get accepted or not. And then that is on one hand. On the other hand, you have the pressure that you have to publish either because of your promotion, because of your ranking, etc., where publications matter. And then you are desperate that the scientific work which you have carried out should come out, should get published somewhere. So what people sometimes do is that they will prepare the same research work into 2 different manuscripts or 3 different manuscripts, and they send them to different journals almost at the same time. It's like I'll throw 3-4 stones at the tree, and at least one stone will hit a mango or something, and I'll get the mango. So what they try to do is they prepare the same manuscript in 2 or 3 different versions, and then submit them to different journals with the hope that at least one journal will accept their paper. Now, in this particular case, Srijan Das and Daud, what happened was they did the same thing. They sent the manuscript to different journals in last week of February 2014. Now, both the journals, unfortunately for them, they accepted the manuscripts. So first, I think this RSA Advances accepted the manuscript in April 2014. Sorry. Then in the same year, the other journal, Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews, they accepted their manuscript in July 2014. So now you see the situation. Okay, it is almost the same work which has been sent to two different journals, and both the journals happen to accept the paper. So this is the Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews paper, where the title says photocatalytic CO2 transformation into fuel, a review on advances in photocatalyst and photoreactor. And the RSS advances paper is a review on advances in photocatalyst towards CO2 conversion. So essentially, it was the same work. Okay. So then you can see again how there's some minor changes in letter in the way they have written it, etc. Energy consumption from fossil fuels have great importance. Energy produced from fossil fuels has great importance because they can be burnt, oxidized to carbon dioxide, because the latter can be burned, oxidized to carbon dioxide and water. So you can see that it's almost one-to-one correspondence with anyone who has some knowledge of English can very easily see that they are simply just the same word. So the whole thing was it was all similar work, etc., and no difference at all in the two manuscripts. So this is a typical case of what is called a self-plagiarism. Then, of course, this came to the attention of the journals, and then when the editor wrote to the authors, okay, they had to accept their mistake, and so hence this the journal, this Elsevier journal, that was withdrawn. Okay. Because the earlier manuscript was published in RSA Advances earlier itself. So you see, when you actually submit a paper for publication, there is a condition. There are certain terms and conditions which you have to sign and accept. Okay, and one of these conditions is that the authors actually declare explicitly that the paper is their original work and not published. Number one, and number two, not under consideration for publication elsewhere. So both conditions are there. Okay, not published and not under consideration for publication in some other journal. And then reuse of any data should be appropriately quoted and cited. Okay, and the scientific community takes a very strong view on this matter, and apologies are offered to the readers of the journal that this was not detected during the submission process. It would have been very difficult because you see, they sent the manuscript to the two journals simultaneously, and simultaneously the referring process would have started. And see, by chance, if the referees had been same, the mistake would have been immediately caught out. But unfortunately, they were different referees, so they won't have known that the same manuscript was being considered at some other journal also. Okay, so then, so this is one very, very often this can happen when people under pressure to publish, they send the same manuscript to different journals, and if they happen to get accepted, you end up in what is called self-plagiarism. So now let's see how do you achieve closure, okay, when your own manuscript gets plagiarized, paper gets plagiarized by someone else, okay? So how do you achieve a completeness of the whole thing? See, you have caught out the person who has plagiarized your paper, but after that, what? How can you be totally protected? Or how can the issue be fully closed? See, what happens, as I was told earlier, that whenever there is only just an erratum which is issued, or an apology, or a correction, okay, to the paper, there is no proper closure. See, a full closure means the paper who have plagiarized an earlier article, it has to be retracted from publication. That is what is called a full closure. But instead of that, if it happens to be just an apology or things like that, then there is no proper closure. Why? Because these apologies and errata and all the corrections, they appear much later after publication of the original paper. And because they appear much later, no one bothers about these issues. But unless, if the journal can link that apology or an erratum or a correction to the original paper and mention whenever someone tries to download that paper, immediately you will also see a notice there that, look, there was an apology associated with this paper. So if that occurs, of course, then you have some redemption. But if that doesn't happen, then again, there's no full closure. Okay, but you have to suffer even further. So in this kind of a situation, whenever we have Indian victims of plagiarism, who will support and who will protect, especially our Indian students, okay, when their work gets plagiarized by someone else? See, till recently, there was no formal or statutory body to deal with cases like this. In the United States, there's already a body called the Organization for Research Integrity, which actually takes care of all these issues. And there's something called Committee on Publication Ethics also, which also takes care of certain issues. So, mostly in India, as we have seen in the case for Rajput, etc., they're all dealt on an ad hoc basis. And again, unless the public, there's a big hue and cry in the public and the social media, nobody even bothers about these plagiarism. And they used to be dealt with only when somebody raised a big issue and tried to bring people's attention. So that was the situation. So now with the establishment of this UGC care and these UGC bodies, statutory bodies, they are expected to fulfill this object to a certain extent by acting like something like a watchdog, okay, to provide defense mechanisms to victims of plagiarism. So let's hope that UGC at least will be more proactive in future. And more primarily, I would say that you as students, please don't indulge in any form of plagiarism. Okay, now I would like to give you some idea about what kind of problems one can face when you have a very, very novel idea, something like what I said, an out-of-the-box thinking or a path-breaking idea. See, whenever you are doing some kind of a path-breaking research, okay, you have to take very, very special care to protect your knowledge or protect these discoveries, okay. So how to disseminate this this new knowledge which you have discovered, and then how to publish this scientific knowledge which you have discovered? The first thing one has to do is that you must publish or disseminate this to a peer group in a particular area of research immediately. This is very, very important. I'll give you two examples where the first example where it has actually people failed to protect their scientific knowledge. And the other example, of course, was a very successful example which resulted in a Nobel Prize. So the first example was the case of water on the moon. And this originated in our Chandrayaan-1 mission from ISRO. And there was a probe on this mission called the Chandrayaan Altitudinal Compositional Analyzer or something like that. Okay. So CHASE, this was called CHASE. This was a small probe which was on that Chandrayaan mission. And this probe actually found evidence for water on the moon. And this water on the moon issue was a very, very hot topic some few years ago. And everyone was in the race to actually discover the evidence of water on the moon. So there were people from NASA, there were people from Japan, China, everyone was in Europe. A lot of people were involved in this race. And it so happened that the Chandrayaan-1 mission, which this, along with this Chase probe, it actually discovered the presence of water, which was almost 3 full months before the NASA's corresponding probe would actually discover the same uh, water on the moon. And the other example I said was that of the high-TC superconductors way back in 1986. And here what happened was the results were immediately published in a national journal. And that helped the authors ultimately gain a timestamp on the research work. So as I said, if you're doing some path-breaking research, first thing you need to do is first protect it and then publish it as soon as possible in such a way that the information reaches the suitable peer group in the shortest possible time. This could be in the form of publication, or there's another method which I'll try to tell you what it is. So what happened with this Chase probe of Chandrayaan mission, which they found water 3 months in advance? The author, the scientists who were in charge of this mission, Chase, this probe, they wanted to publish their work in a very high impact journal like Science or Nature. So it was a path-breaking idea, path-breaking discovery, and they wanted, naturally, of course, even if I'm sure if you get something like that, you would like to publish in one of the top journals. So they wanted to publish their results in Nature. Now, what happened was Nature and Science, these very high impact journals, it is very, very difficult to convince the referees in the first place that you have a path-breaking discovery. Okay, so they will look into all aspects of the whole thing and then decide whether it is really true or false. Is there any room for even the slightest hint of doubt will immediately result in a rejection. So what happened was these people sent their manuscript to Nature first. After 2 months or so, Nature did not accept the manuscript, and they sent it to Science. And they were going on doing this. What they failed to do was simply actually make a pre-publication of the result in a suitable archive, either the condensed matter archives or even astrophysics archive. Astrophysics archives were very much present and available. They could have simply first put the results in an archive, which would have ensured that their discovery would get a timestamp. And now it is accepted. This any article which is published in an archive is considered as a genuine. It's not a full publication, but it is considered as a research work which has been reported. Okay, and that timestamp will hold once that manuscript gets accepted. It will be written that this was first submitted in archives and then published subsequently in a particular journal. So you retain your timestamp. But unfortunately, these authors did not do that, and they lost the race because NASA managed to get their results published earlier than these people. Okay, so that was so where did they go wrong? As I said, they went wrong because first of all, they could have simply submitted their results to an archive or the suitable forum. And there were other journals which are available, probably not as high impact as Nature or Science, but they could have also published in a probably slightly lesser known journal. They could have also published in our own national journal, Pramana, for example, or Current Science. That would have definitely ensured their timestamp. Because it was such a very, path-breaking discovery, but they didn't do that, unfortunately. And so ultimately, of course, they published the results in a Elsevier journal, and you can see that this is Planetary and Space Science, which is an Elsevier journal, which of course appeared much later than the NASA paper. Okay, and so then it's very clearly written: the Chase experiment made a direct detection of water on the lunar ambience, complementing the moon mineralogical mapper in the same mission. So, but all this has no meaning because you see, already people have published it elsewhere. And of course, the reason for rejection from Nature was that these people, detectors were not as high resolution or something like that. And they could not be, they had some doubt on the detectors, etc. I mean, this could be all minor things, but unfortunately, they had to bear the brunt of this, take the responsibility for this problem. The other case where the authors were highly successful was the case of the high DC superconductivity issue, which came up in 1986. This was a very, very revolutionary path-breaking discovery where Bednorz and Muller, the two authors, okay, they discovered this high TC superconductors. When you say high TC, they were at a temperature of about 80 Kelvin or so, whereas all superconductors before that happened to be below 4 Kelvin. Those who are not in the area of superconductivity, this is the information for them. So Bednorz and Muller discovered a system, a compound, which turned superconducting in the region of some 80 Kelvin or so. It was a fantastic discovery, but then they had a problem actually. The problem was that they knew that the samples were not very, very pure. There were certain impurities, there were multiphases in their samples, and they knew that if they send the results to a journal, okay, this were the results which they saw. You can see this is the resistivity and this is the temperature. You can see that at some point around 25 Kelvin or so, there's a sharp fall in the resistivity and goes to zero, almost zero. So this was their result. But they knew that there were several compounds which they prepared, and for this particular compound, they knew that one phase in their compound actually gave rise to this kind of superconductivity, but they were unable to characterize at that point of time which of those three phases was actually superconducting. So they had a problem there, and they knew that if they send these results to a very top journal like Nature, they'll simply throw them out because they were themselves saying that they had impurities in the sample, and they were all themselves unable to identify. So what did they do? They did a very smart thing. They tried to, in fact, it is now given in their novel lecture. Okay, so what happens was that they contacted their boss. Okay, and their boss actually happened to be on the editorial board of this journal called Zeitschrift für Physik. And this Zeitschrift für Physik at that point of time was a very low-key journal. It was confined to mostly Germany. So most of the papers appeared in German there, and they had very few readers outside Germany. So it was like a local national journal. So then they convinced their boss to probably put this, load this paper, because there was an editorial board that he could at least influence the others there to publish their paper. See, on their own, it probably even Zeitschrift might have rejected their results. Who knows? So then, once, of course, the person decided to help the people, they could actually publish the paper. And rest is, of course, history. And there was a huge impact on this area. And of course, these people were given the Nobel Prize. So you can see that how these guys were smart enough to publish the results in a low-key journal and then make sure that they publish it so that they get a timestamp. Okay, so this is very important. So you need to act fast. You need to be very smart, and then make sure that the results formally reach the peer group in your area of research. There was one more paper which appeared in Physical Review Letters on this field of skyrmions. Again, this last few years, there's a lot of work done on this skyrmions. So in this particular compound MNSI, there was an article which appeared in 2013. Actually, this was in April 2013. On the same compound, there was another paper which appeared from Indore. Okay, this was a group of authors from Indore, and they published in a journal called Physical Status Solidi. And unfortunately, this is a this is a East European journal, which doesn't have a very high impact factor. Having published this, okay, it was a good thing that they could publish it, but they could have also uploaded their results on the condensed matter archive, which they did not do. Okay, at least if they had uploaded their work on the condensed matter archive, it was pretty sure that this paper probably would not have got accepted in PRL because already someone has uploaded the same work on the same compound on the archive and it's under consideration for publication at some journal. So unfortunately, these two authors did not do that, and the result was that these people could get a PRL, but of course, once the PRL got accepted for publication, the editors and the authors noticed that this was already a published paper here, and they just simply added a note and proved that we became aware of another study on MNSI, this reference 26, which also detected scurvy on lattice phase, okay, and the change of transition from first to second order that we report here. But then they go on to say that the resolution of their work is much better than the resolution of this work, etc., etc. But that, you see, those things have not much meaning because this was the first discovery of that phenomena, but unfortunately, they did not give it much publicity, even though they had the means to do so. Okay, so this was actually published in January 2013, whereas the PRL was published in April 2013. Okay, so now going on, how do you check for plagiarism? This happens to be the thesis of my student, and you can see that the plagiarism software it goes on checking in different ways, etc., and then looks for matching text. The problem is the algorithms which are written up for this software, they are not, they don't have any brain of their own. Okay, so even things like address lines or affiliations, they get repeated in different papers, and they say that there's a repetition going on here. Okay, and sometimes the processes for experimental procedures, they're very common, and sometimes they also get repeated, and they also get caught up in this plagiarism checks. So ultimately, anyway, it gave out a good figure of below 10%. So this could go ahead, and then the thesis was considered. Then the another thing is that whenever you submit a thesis, the naturally most of the thesis work would have already got published in some publications, and there is a provision to tell the software that that this thesis work has been published in so and so papers, and hence these need to be excluded from the plagiarism check. So it's called a self-plagiarism exclusion certificate from the supervisor. So you need to give the details of the papers which have been published as a result of the thesis work, so that whenever it goes for a plagiarism check, it takes care of this issue and then excludes them from the self-plagiarism issue. So what are these plagiarism detectors? Are they really helpful, or they are a problem? See, the main issue is that plagiarism softwares are written by men. Okay, so they are all algorithms which are designed and written by human beings. And whatever the way which a human being will actually look at an issue, the software also will try to look at it, but without any mind. So in reality, actually, you can see that actually a software can in fact fail to find plagiarism, especially if it happens to be, say, an idea plagiarism, or maybe if that plagiarized text had not been digitized, or maybe some spelling errors, and do not check. It will simply go on for one-to-one correspondence of text. Okay. So really, as per this author here, software cannot determine plagiarism. It can only point to some cases of matching text. Okay, so nothing to beat a human being or a human intervention when it actually comes to checking plagiarism. Okay, so I think I wanted to deal with one more topic, but I think the time is up right now. So probably I'll stop here, and then I'll continue my next lecture. So yes, so please let me know in case anyone has any questions on this lecture so far. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions, or write in the box.
Hello?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in the first two slides, you were mentioning about the levels of similarities. So
Yes.
the levels of similarities were based on just the text. Also, were there to consider some conceptual similarities?
One is, the first thing is text. Second thing would be to look at the figures. Okay, the figures also constitute an important part, and some of the software, not all, some of the softwares they can actually look at the figures also and try to indicate certain similarities in the figures also. So again, I said mainly it is based on text, and next come of course the similarities. Again, this, as I said, plagiarism of ideas, that is very difficult to detect by softwares. Yes, any further questions, please? There is some question ahead. One second. Yes. So, which software tool is provided by HBNI for plagiarism checking for its student? Okay, it's a very good question. Since I'm not a part of, I'm a guest lecturer here, so I need to find out. I'll let you know. What about the other collaborators cited as authors in his papers? Uh, okay, in which context? This is about yes, Professor Chiranjeevi case. Yes, the other collaborators cited as authors. Yes, there was a problem with the other faculty who were part of this publications, and I think there was some action taken up by the university. Probably they were also penalized, but worst affected were the students, because you see the professor is already having his job, but the students, they have to go out and get jobs, get fellowships or postdocs, etc. So I mean, for them the consequences were very bad. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah, what is that? In the lecture you referred that we should disseminate our discovery to our peer groups before taking time to submit a well-written manuscript. How to find such? What I meant was this condensed matter archive is one possible route through which you can actually submit your manuscript, or a pre-publication manuscript. It could be a roughly written manuscript. You can always revise it and then submit it to a journal later. So you can submit it to, if you are happen to be in condensed matter physics, you have condensed matter archives. If you are in chemistry, you have chemistry archives, like that biology archives or astrophysics archives. So you can submit your manuscript or your results to this archive, which is now considered a valid peer group, and which will also ensure you a time and date stamp on your research work. Any other questions, please? Anyone else has any questions to ask? Are there any similar platforms in engineering sciences? I'm sure. I'm sure there are. Of course, I guess there is something called engineering archives. I can find out about it. Since I'm not an engineering person, I have not tried to check it. So this is another point I would like. I will definitely check it out and let you know let you know by in the next lecture, as well as the software which is used under. See, HBNI. I guess what one needs to do is, you know, you have different constituent units. So each constituent unit will have its own plagiarism software which has been purchased by that unit. So you need to use that software for checking your manuscript for plagiarism. Yeah, someone is trying to ask a question. Please.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Sir, as a reviewer, what role he can play with respect to plagiarism?
Yes, I think I have considered one example in the last class. This is quite often a very distinct possibility that the reviewer himself can actually plagiarize your work. This has happened several times and not the first time or anything like that. And in fact, I have illustrated one case last time. Maybe in next class again, I will illustrate this case where a manuscript was sent to a journal, and that reviewer himself, he never replied back, and then simply took that whole work and published it in a different journal as his own work. And the original author was aghast when he found out that his own work was published elsewhere by a different person. He made sure he contacted the journal editors. Fortunately, both the journal editors talked to each other. They found out that yes, it was the same person who was the referee for the first journal who has published that same paper in the second journal, and then they, of course, they retracted that paper. Yes.
Second, sir, when you check a manuscript in some plagiarism software, whether they can steal a manuscript and copy manuscript and send somewhere else.
Now, who can steal?
The plagiarism software itself.
No. The software is purchased under some license, and that exists or that will reside in your own institution. Okay, and so there's no question that that software can act like a human being. It will only check whether your manuscript has any plagiarized text or not. That's all. So, okay, if you mean the person who is operating the software, then of course God save you, because it's your own institution person who is in control of that. Okay, so generally such a thing doesn't happen. So I don't think there's any chance of a software on its own. I mean, detecting. Or taking your manuscript and then publishing it elsewhere. I don't think that happens at all.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. Okay, any further questions, please? That's done. All right, so we'll meet in the next class whenever it is supposed to be. Okay, so till then, goodbye.